Okay, so we have the entry fragger tier list for attack. So first of all, I'm just going to go over the bottom tier, which is the support flex tier. These people aren't necessarily worse than the people above them. They're just not entry operators, so I wanted to put them in their own category so that you wouldn't be worried about where they'd be placed on that tier list. So obviously we have all of our hard breachers. These are all support characters, so they go in here. We have everybody with EMPs, so they're flex operators. We have the flank watch operators, which are also flex operators. And then we have these two smoke operators here, the vertical play operators here. We have all of the drone operators, and then we have all of the secondary wall support operators here. With that out of the way, let's actually go into the entries, starting off with the bad tier. These are all entries that are entry fraggers, but they're just bad in the current meta. So Amaru, pretty useless. She does have a high win rate, but that doesn't mean that she's necessarily a good entry. Her playstyle allows her to get kills, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she is meta. We're in a TDM heavy sort of kind of meta right now where everybody's just like running at each other and shooting each other, but Amaru just kind of gets you killed with maybe 1 or 2 kills that you get along the way. She's not really good for the meta because she doesn't bring utility that is good for the meta at all. She just kind of exists. Same thing with Blackbeard. His utility is terrible. One of the worst operators in the entire game. He just has a piece of paper in front of his face. Not really anything good there. His gun selection is pretty terrible. The only thing he has really going for him are the EMP grenades, but even then, you have all of these operators in the support category that you can bring EMP grenades for. If you still want the entry playstyle, you also have Dokkaebi and Lion that you can sub out for him. So really no reason to play either of these operators. They're pretty bad entries. Then we have the situational tier. These are operators that are good entries, but only in certain situations. Blitz, good example, Oregon. Oregon is a really good blitz map because you can rush elbow with blitz, or you can roam clear top down for the basement site as blitz with a teammate behind you. So there are certain scenarios if you're queued with teammates or just solo pushes by yourself if you're good at blitz that you can do, but other than that, he is pretty useless. Same thing with Glaz. There are certain Glaz pushes you can do, let's say the coastline sites where you're trying to maybe counter a warden, or you have a really long angle like the archive site for border, but that's pretty much it. Other than that, he's pretty useless. His scope is too zoomed in. That is kind of his issue. He has frag grenades, which make him pretty valued, but if you're bringing frag grenades, you might as well bring somebody else because that negates his entire utility. Now, if you have smoke grenades that your teammates have, then you can bring frag grenades, but even then, that's still only situational, right? Because you're not always going to have teammates. This is a solo queue list, so that being said, I think both of these operators are situational. Then we have the good category. These are all people who are good at entry fragging. Maybe not like super meta right now, but they're still good for the meta and you can still play them and nobody would really complain. Starting off with Finka. Finka was really good when people discovered how good her weapons were. Even the spear, even her shotgun, not even talking about her LMG, right, are all really good weapons. Her LMG right now, if you know how to control the recoil, is still a pretty good weapon. She also has smoke grenades and she has her adrenal surges, which are really good. The only thing is everyone's running Warden, so her smokes are kind of useless, and she doesn't have the Gonsex or the frag grenades for the bulletproof destructibility, so she really does not fit the whole like Azami sort of thing that we have going on right now. And then we have Grim. Grim has seen a huge resurgence in like his playstyle and how good he is because of the enormous buff that they gave him. So they pretty much buffed every stat for his gadget, like every single one. The amount of time that it takes, the amount of time it takes to deploy, the amount of time it takes to deploy your launcher, the amount of time it takes for the bees to ping you, the amount of pings you get pinged by his bees. They gave him a bailiff, they gave him a 1.5 and a 2x scope, so they just gave him a huge assortment of buffs, which made him a lot easier to play, and that was his main issue, is that his gadget was really clunky and he wasn't easy to play. Now that issue is completely gone, so he's finally found his place in the meta, and that's as a 3-speed entry that you use as utility to get initial info off of, and then you swing with your gun. And then we have Zofia. Zofia is still an entry. The only issue that she has that's making her not meta is the fact that she's a 3 armor, and this is a huge deal, and I'll tell you why. We're in a very fast-paced meta. I've talked about this in literally every single video for the past like 15 videos that I've made. The reason that being a 3 armor, is really bad is because we're in a TDM heavy meta where everyone's just running and gunning really quickly, and 3 armors can't keep the pace with that. They can't keep up with all of the attacking team because they're so slow, and her slowness is not really paired well with her weapon, which is really bad. And then finally we have the meta tier. These are all operators that are really good at entering, but not only that, they fit the meta really well. A meta is the current best way of playing the game. This can be said for any single game. It's the best operators and the best strategies that you can use to sort your playstyle based off of what's strong and what's not. So Yana and Ashe and all of these operators in the meta category are really good because of the way that the game works right now. Like I said, the game is super fast-paced, so fast-paced operators are really good, like Ashe, like Ying, like Yana. And then you have operators like Jackal who are really good at roam clearing and furthering the pace that the round goes by. Now operators like Nock are not really necessarily fast-paced, but everything about their kit is still meta. So that's what the meta category is. Now that we've gone over that, let's go over all of the operators, starting with Ashe. I think Ashe is meta. I've talked about it a lot in my tier lists where Ashe is not necessarily a good operator. Like if you're picking her for her utility, then you're picking her for the wrong reasons. She's really just meant to be played as like this really fast, really gun skill heavy operator, and that's about it. If you're picking her for her ranged breaches, you can play Zofia, who also brings more utility. If you're playing her for the G36C, you can bring Yana, who brings more utility. If you're playing her for a 3-speed and a good gun, you can play, let's see, Sens, Grim, IQ, Capitao, Maverick, Hibana. These are all operators that are 3 speeds that bring really good utility. So there's no reason to bring Ashe, and unless you're bringing her for the R4C and you're playing her in a really fast-paced style of playstyle, which is really meta right now. So she's not a good operator necessarily, but she's really meta at entering. Next is Nook. Now, she's not fast at all. She's slow, and she's meant to be played slow. The way you play her is you wait for all of your team to push one side, and then once all the defenders are looking there, you sneak up behind them and you get a few kills. That's how you're meant to play her, especially if they have a bunch of camera operators like Echo, Valkyrie, Maestro, Mozzie, pretty much anybody in between, or they're just on cameras really heavily. Nock completely counters this. She also has frag grenades, which I've talked about being very beneficial in general, because there's only 4 operators in the game that have them, being Glaz, Sledge, her, and Yana. So that's pretty much it. So she's pretty valued. 1.5 times scope in a game where it's really meta to have a 1.5 times scope because of the TDM meta that we're in right now, and then a low recoil SMG to balance it all off. So I think she fits the meta perfectly. Maybe not in terms of how fast she plays, but everything else, I think she's extremely meta. Next, let's get into Ying. Ying, I think, is super meta for the same reasons that Nock is meta, not necessarily the fact that she's fast, but it's everything else about her playstyle. So I think Ying is probably the most underrated attacker in the entire game. If you take her on maps like Oregon or Clubhouse, where it's very close range and people are going to be forced to be blinded by you, she's very good. Now, you can make the argument that, yes, everyone is playing Warden right now, but it doesn't really matter. If you play Warden and you play him religiously and you have tons of hours on Warden, I guarantee you can still only count on one hand how many times your Warden goggles have actually been used to counter flashes or smokes to actually get kills. People are not playing Warden for his utility. They're not playing him for his glasses or to counter smokes. They're just playing him because he brings a deployable shield or a nitro cell and a 1.5 times scope on a really good SMG. That's it. That's the only reason they're playing him. So if you're playing Ying into a Warden, first you can either just drone out if it's a Warden or not, or you can just throw in flash grenades that are all fully cooked, because then he won't have time to react and then counter your blinds. Even if he's not blind and you're throwing blinds at him, you're still in a scenario where you have a better gun than he does, in my opinion, and you're still able to 1v1 him, right? So he doesn't really need to be blind. You can just take the 1v1 if you're not a pussy. Now, that being said, even if we're not talking about Warden, she has a 1.5 times scope. She also has a 2x scope and 2.5 times scope on her LMG. And it's an LMG, which means it has a lot of ammo. It has very little recoil as well. She also brings smoke grenades, so if they aren't bringing a Warden, it's very good for planting. And she makes it to where if you blind somebody, they can't fight back. So in a really fast-paced meta, you can just go in with your blinds early game really quickly and get a lot of value for your team. So if you're looking to play an entry with maybe a bit more utility, Ying is definitely the girl to do it with. Now we have Jackal. Jackal's really slept on right now because everyone's banning him, so people forgot how good Jackal is. Now, people are like putting him in really low tiers in most tier lists, but they didn't change Jackal at all. And everyone and their mother is roaming right now, so if anything, this is the best meta for Jackal, and he's as good as he's ever going to get, probably the best he's ever been in years, because everyone is roaming. So if you can get away with not having Jackal banned, he's super good for this meta because he counters everyone just running around and shooting you. He also has a 1.5 times scope and a 2x scope. Both of his weapons are really good. He also brings a secondary shotgun if you want to play vertically, make rotates for yourself, or just destroy stuff that needs to be destroyed. And he has claymores / smokes. Smokes are good if they don't have a Warden, and claymores are good for watching your flank, because people flank a lot because we're in a fast-paced meta where everyone is, again, roaming. So I think he's super meta right now. Next we have Yana, and she, in my opinion, is the best entry right now. She is the best one. That's why I put her at the top. All of these operators, by the way, are ordered in order from best to worst in their category, except for obviously the ones down here. But Yana, I think, is the best and most meta entry in the entire game. The reason for this being is because she has infinite information. That's really good in this game in general. It doesn't matter what meta you're in. Also, she has 2 amazing guns. The ARX, even without the 1.5 times scope, is outstanding. And then she has a G36C with the 1.5 times scope, which we talked about with dash being super, super good. Not even going into everything else that she has. Good weapons, she has good information. Also, she has frag grenades, which we talked about with knock and glass being super, super valuable. She also has the combo of information and bulletproof destructibility, meaning she brings everything to the table that you could possibly want and need, especially if you're solo queuing. You're basically an all-in-one package that can do anything the team or you needs without you really needing to rely on your teammates, which is really, really good for a solo queue operator. She's good at entering because of her weapon selection, but also her playstyle. You just drone out where you're gonna go in, and then you go in. Her clone is a lot faster at roam clearing and getting information than drones could be, just because of the way you're able to move her clone, which further reinforces the fast playstyle that you can get when playing Yana. So that's pretty much it for the meta category, and that's it for the entire tier list. If you disagree with anything that I had to say or you have any questions, let me know down below. Sub the channel down below as well. Like the video if you liked it. My name is Alka, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Later.